Georgia used to be the banking capital of the South, but the state lost that position to Charlotte, North Carolina, in part because of burdensome state regulations that wouldn't allow banks to expand outside their hometowns. The rules were repealed by the late 1990s, but the damage was done. Georgia would feel the effects through the mortgage crisis, which had an exaggerated impact because the state had many weaker standalone banks.
Georgia has had over 77 bank closures.
Another Georgia bank has failed.
First City Bank survived the Great Depression but is now closed.
The slew of bank failures in our state likely will continue.
More bank failures here by number of banks than any other single state in the country.
A new study from the Georgia Public Policy Foundation found that new regulations, this time from the federal government, are threatening Georgia's banks and economy once again. The Durbin Amendment, part of the Dodd-Frank Act, reduced the amount banks receive from retailers for debit card transactions. For banks already struggling with souring loans in some of the worst economic times since the Great Depression, this blow to a stable source of revenue may be more than they can handle.
What we found is that the regulations coming out of Washington, D.C., particularly those from the Dodd-Frank bill, that put price controls on our banks in terms of debit card processing are having a very detrimental effect and in essence strangling our economic recovery. Georgia's big banks were directly impacted by the Dodd-Frank price controls. For example, SunTrust Bank, headquartered here in Atlanta, saw about $50 million in lost revenue in just the first few months. Synovus Bank, headquartered in Columbus, had seen 34% of its net income disappear. And it's not just the big banks. The small banks have been impacted as well. Small community banks and credit unions were exempted by the law, but one of the problems with top-down regulation are the unintended consequences. What many people don't realize is community bankers and credit union managers are worried that retailers are going to steer their customers to using debit cards that are under the price controls and therefore cheaper. In fact, many of our small community banks have seen a 10 to 15% reduction in their fees already. And so right as banks are trying to build up their reserves, the federal government has hit us with these strangling regulations that have prevented banks from loaning money. And we know that when banks aren't loaning money, local economies and small businesses can't grow. So this is going to have a terribly detrimental impact on our small town communities. Our role as the Georgia Public Policy Foundation is to propose public policies that result in a thriving economy and a thriving state. We believe that the health of the banking industry is critical to Georgia's long-term future, and these federal regulations that are detailed in our study are hindering our ability to be competitive. If you want a copy of our study, you can go to our website at georgiapolicy.org.
What will the future of Georgia's economy look like, and will it make a full recovery? The answer to that question may depend on whether the Durbin Amendment remains in place.